Ladies and gentlemen, once more, thank you for honoring this invitation. We did say before that on the eve of every State of the Nation address, we shall have this for two purposes, maybe for three. The most important purpose, so that you all can have fun. That's the key one and the very most important one. And secondly, though, to give you an update on where we are on the various issues that we know affect you, your businesses, and your various constituencies. And thirdly, to share with you our plan going forward for the future. And we like to keep this format because we do think that it is the format that's going to work for us. If I start to stutter, you must know that this time yesterday I was standing in Ghana at the airport in Accra, and I flew SAA. I flew that A300-400, that same flight, that aircraft that goes from Johannesburg to Cape Town, the one you sit up front the whole time. So for 6 hours I sat like that. And then I had to sit for another 2 hours from Joburg to here. And I didn't have much sleep. So I'll talk very, very quickly before I fall asleep in front of you. But the reason I was in Ghana is South Africa. We are the Secretariat of the Association for African Maritime Administrations. Now, that association is important because it brings all the SAMSAs of Africa in one roof. And I think we've managed to create a name for ourselves. And the purpose that we've set up for ourselves is to guide the regulatory formulation and all the initiatives that seek to promote harmony and regulations at sea, but more importantly, to implement those, there's something called the AIM 2050 strategy. It's the maritime strategy for the continent, which has huge economic elements that need to be implemented. That whole issue of harmonizing ship registration regulations, manning regulations, and all of that. And we have managed to get them to agree to take up your SAMSA code for near coastal qualifications and a whole lot of such regulations that are largely based on the South African practices. Now, what it does is that it creates a huge opportunity, particularly for those of us that are in the training environment, because the next thing is to get those governments to agree to SAMSA standards, and then the training that we put together is sellable throughout the continent, and we thought that we would want to do that. So we're going to have a discussion, particularly with the training providers, that help us to get them out there. And I shall come back to why we want to do that. So the meeting went quite well. And the one key takeaway from that meeting is that on the 27th to the 29th of October, Mr. Matir, am I right? South Africa is hosting the World Maritime Day parallel event. It is an IMO function that brings all the maritime countries, 178 of them, to Durban, and we must put together a program that showcases what we can and what we have done about the maritime sector in the country. So those dates are the 29th, 27th to the 29th of October. But alongside, the African Maritime Administrations will then host their annual conference also in Durban. So it's likely to be a very busy week that brings, as I'm saying, all the countries of the world, but particularly the African contingent that's likely to be here. spoke a lot about the issues that we need to be talking about, because there's all near coastal or the EEZ operations of the various countries, particularly in the oil and gas. And we thought that there is an opportunity for our players in the country to go and play out there. And we're trying to really get that discussion that allows us to support them better, so that you've got access into all the countries that you need to have access on. From a local front, last week we had a presidential imbizo. It's called Siyahlola, some engagement oversight project that the presidency undertake. The deputy minister was in Port Elizabeth. Some of you might have seen it on TV. We do think that it went well, and I'm going to go back to the Department of Transport to take up some of the issues that were raised. More importantly, an idea of creating some committee attached to Operation Phakisa, but involving industry, to look at all these blockages that cannot be resolved at SAMSA DOT level, issues of taxation, etc. And there was an immediate follow-up with the ministry in the presidency, with the shipping guys, to discuss the issues of taxation. Why do we do these things? We do these things because as SAMSA, we've set ourselves up on a strategy that looks towards 2030. And we've said that this strategy, and I'm sure I've shared with you before, is to help South Africa to become an international maritime center by 2030. And we've given an interpretation that has got two legs, if you like, pillars. On the one hand, you want a SAMSA that becomes a model maritime authority. And it shall be a SAMSA that is capacitated, that has got systems, that is consistent, all these things that you complain about. We need to sort those things if we are going to be respected as a regulator. On the other hand, we have said that we will assist South Africa to create a vibrant maritime economy. And we went further to say, how shall we know that it is vibrant? Contribution to GDP by all these entities that you work at and you shall form, as well as the number of jobs that you will create. Talking to Saimi here to help us really give us the parameters so that we know exactly how to measure our progress towards that 2030. But from a vibrant maritime, from the model maritime authority point of view, we have immediate challenges. Some of you would have seen the article that was that came out a few weeks ago from Maritime Review. We've still got the implementation of IMO instruments, which is a big audit that's coming up next year in Feb, where we need to demonstrate to IMO that we give in full effect to all its instruments. There are a whole lot of laws that we need to get up to speed, and we're talking to Mr. Madia, my DDG over there, and DOT to help us bring those acts into place. We have implemented the low sulfur fuels. We haven't, but 1st of January came, and we had to implement it, or at least it had to be implemented. We don't have the law to enforce all the provisions. We accepted that. We had agreed that we would have that act amendment done by June of this year. We're talking to industry, we've spoken to various of you. Nothing has changed in that regard. The reason you're doing this thing is because we're going the cleaner route. The world needs to address climate change issues, which are driven by pollution in a large part. So as South Africa, we are invested in that campaign. We're signatories to the Paris Agreement and all these other multilateral agreements that we tied on. The one thing we've always said is that it is important for us that we understand the economic impacts of the measures that are taken to address issues of climate change. And it is important because much as it is a big discussion from a climate change scientific perspective, but it becomes an economic discussion for us. If you're going to start picking up an additional charge because fuel has become more expensive or because ships need new technologies, that within, if it goes outside the price elasticity, then it affects your logistics costs. And we need to understand exactly just how big that impact is. I learned last week that the shipping container people are starting to levy some of their containers because of some surcharge linked to the low sulfur fuels. Now that was never the deal. So said we just need to understand what drives that, and we're going to have a discussion in that regard. So we are implementing, as I'm saying, the low sulfur fuels. We still need to understand the economic impact, and then jointly we shall advise how government has to respond as a country to that. Lastly, on the updates, the STCW whitelisting issue is still a big issue for us. I was wanting Captain Keller to come and tell you, just in case you accuse me of lying to you or misleading you. I see he's delegated that upwards. We have HTW in June, and we're hoping that we'll present our case. We shall be ready. There were regulations that we were waiting for. We don't have those regulations, and if we do not have those regulations, we cannot do our self-assessment, and it's something that we're working around. We think that we've still got time. No need to, it's not desperate, or we're desperate but not critical. I don't want to sound like a politician now, but you get what I mean. And then from the economy side, the biggest issue has been the issues of taxation. It does seem that after last week's engagement, we may just have a way forward, at least in terms of getting those people in government that deal with taxation matters. It does appear that there may just be a way forward. I think it is still too soon, because the way forward that we were given, we have not put in place. We are going to start working on that in the next few weeks. So it is my hope that those that are affected by taxation issues, whether they are in bunkering or in shipping, that we may just have a way forward, so that at least we know if it's solvable, or may as well give up and go home. I'm not a person that goes home, so we are going to stick at it. But lastly from me, it is really to thank each one of you for all the support that you've given to our campaign. It is our belief that when we've done it, it will be right for all of us. So we have a reason to continue to be invested in the efforts that we are discussing. And from personally, the one question that is all in your minds, I do not know when the CEO of SAMSA will be appointed. And so to settle that question is not to be asked. We're here now, we've got work to do. Sobando is the appointed Chief Operating Officer at SAMSA, so he has a job to do in that regard. And for each one, as I'm saying, from the bottom of my heart to each one of you, thank you ever so much for the support that you've given to our campaign. Thank you very much.